What? Don't have that. I'm like, okay, what are you thinking when you got that smile? It makes me a little nervous.
You'll find out. No.
Oh, because
Everything.
you.
Sorry, them. I think it's Mark. Yeah. Whoever Mark. I just thought we had to. Anyway. Hi everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to the April 9th meeting, our April 9th, 2026 meeting of the Seattle Planning Commission. We like to start our meetings with a land acknowledgement. As we begin our meeting, we respectfully acknowledge that our meeting today is taking place on occupied Coast Salish land. We pay respect to Coast Salish elders, past and present, and extend that respect to their descendants and to all Indigenous people. To acknowledge this land is to recognize the history of physical and cultural genocide and settler colonialism, which continues to displace Indigenous people today. It is to also recognize these lands, waters, and their significance for the resilient and wise peoples who continue to thrive in this region despite the consequences of displacement and broken treaties. Those who hold settler privilege in the city must work towards supporting the Coast Salish people and all Indigenous people using the various forms of wealth and privilege they bring due to it. My name is Zio Alvarez, I use she, they pronouns, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Seattle Planning Commission along with Matt Hutchins. We have a couple of announcements to members of the public and visitors that are joining us today. First of all is welcome. We're happy to make all Planning Commission meetings open to the public, but we do note that the Planning Commission does not hold public hearings. The Commission is an advisory body. We provide recommendations to elected leaders that in turn make the actual decisions. We encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comment appropriately to elected officials. This meeting is a hybrid meeting with some individuals participating remotely while others are participating in person in the Boards and Commissions room at Seattle City Hall. For the next part of our program, I'd like to invite a commissioner to choose and briefly speak to one of our color brave space norms that they feel have a particular relevance to today's agenda.
I think for most of our topics, but especially right now, I think keep focused on our collective goal, create racial justice through Black liberation and Native sovereignty.
Appreciate that, Caleb. If there's no amendments or modifications, I'll suggest that we all agree to these norms.
Yeah, I'm seeing in the chat that a member of the public can't hear. So I just want to check for people on the call, commissioners on the call, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. And the member of the public who can't hear, hopefully you can hear us soon. Our meetings are recorded and posted to YouTube in case your audio isn't working right now. So that continues.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we want to make sure that everybody's set for our meetings. So the next item on the agenda is a round of introductions. I can go first, and I'm going to suggest that we go around the room and then we move to the folks that are joining online. So my name is Zio Alvarez. I use she, they pronouns. I live in White Center Highland Park. And for my day job, I am an associate designer at Element Architects in downtown Seattle. That's to Caleb. And then
My name is Caleb Twolde, EM pronouns. I live in Beacon Hill, and I'm an educator at Rainier Scholars. That's Rose.
Hey, I'm Rose Lucia-Levinson, pronouns they, them. I'm up north in the Northgate, Lipton Springs transition area, and I work at Jacobs as a wetland biologist and burning specialist. Dylan.
Hello, Dylan Stevenson, he, they pronouns. I live in the Chinatown International District neighborhood, and I work at the University of Washington teaching urban planning. I'll pass it to Michaela.
Hello, Michaela Dafford, she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill, and I work in affordable housing policy and planning, and I'm going to pass it to Matt.
I'm Matt Hutchins, co-chair of the Planning Commission with Zio. I'm an architect. I live in West Seattle, and my day job is architecture. I already covered that. All right, let's see, Nick.
Hello, my name is Nick Whipple. I use he, him pronouns. I also live in West Seattle in the North Delridge neighborhood. And for my day job, I'm a planner on the east side. How about Andy?
Hi, I'm Andy Dannenberg, he, him, live in Northeast Seattle and teach at University of Washington in public health and urban planning. And I'm not very good figuring out who hasn't gone yet, if you can help.
Margaret?
I'm Margaret Zealous. I use she, her pronouns. I live in the Ballard Fremont area, and my day job is that I am a law student studying land use and environmental law. And I think, Cecilia, have you gone?
I can go. This is Deanna. Hi, Deanna Quintana, use she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill. For my day job, I'm a multimodal transportation planner. Cecilia, if she hasn't gone.
Hi, I'm Cecilia. I use she, her pronouns. I live in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. For my day job, I work in disability, I'm an ADA coordinator for King County. And I think I hopped on late, but I think I might be the last one to go.
Dylan still hasn't gone.
Oh, Dylan.
Thanks, y'all. Dylan Gwasecki, I use he, him pronouns. I live in the Central District. An architect and urban designer, working on mostly multifamily and projects. And to be on to staff.
Go ahead, Robin.
Sorry, I muted my mic. Robin McGonigal. I live on Vashon Island. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm staff to the commission.
Next, hi everyone, Olivia Baker, she, her pronouns, and I'm staff to the commission.
John Hoy, I use he, him pronouns, and I'm staff to the commission.
I'll wrap this up. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vanessa Murdoch. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm also staff to the commission. Turn it back. See you.
So we have two items on the agenda today. First, we'll finalize our comments on the draft Northgate Regional Center plan, and will then be updated by staff from the Seattle Department of Transportation on the low pollution neighborhoods pilot program. Before we get into that, we need to approve our March 26th, 2026 minutes. So I'll ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
A second.
Caleb seconds.
Caleb seconds. Are there any changes or amendments to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Sorry. Zoom in. All opposed? And any abstentions? Great. So upcoming commission meetings, our next Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for next Thursday, April 16th from 7:30 to 9 a.m. online via the MS Teams platform. And our next full commission meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April 23rd from 7:30 to 9 a.m. I'm going to pass it to Vanessa for some announcements.
Thank you, Zio. As noted before, this is a hybrid meeting. We have a number of commissioners joining us here in the Boards and Commissions room of Seattle's City Hall, and a number of commissioners participating via the Teams platform, and also a number of members of the public. Welcome. We will be using the chat function in MS Teams for all commissioners to join the discussion queue. I'm going to help Zio monitor the queue, and I would just like to remind commissioners to please do not put any substantive comment in the chat. Members of the public who are joining on MS Teams can see the chat, but members of the public who are calling in, not. And we want to make sure that all of our discussion is open to all members of the public who care to listen in to our meetings. We have an opportunity. We are providing a couple different ways for members of the public to provide public comment, which we welcome. You can either email me in advance of the meeting, or you can show up here in the Boards and Commissions room of City Hall. Or if you are joining on the MS Teams platform and you would like to offer comment, please raise your hand in the Teams platform. And if you are calling in, I don't believe anybody is calling in, but if you are calling in, please email me, which that address is vanessa.murdock, MURDOCK @seattle.gov. And then I will recognize when you are calling in. I can see what your phone number you're calling from and be able to recognize you. So with that, I have not received any emails in advance of this meeting. I don't have any emails in my inbox right now. If there are members of the public on the call right now who would care to offer public comment, please raise your hand in the Teams platform. And if there are any members of the public calling in, please email me. And I'll just give a few seconds to see. I'm not seeing any emails and I'm not seeing any hands raised in the Teams platform. So, yes, great.
So the first item on our agenda is our comments on the draft Northgate Regional Center plan. We're finalizing our comments today. The comment period for the draft plan ends tomorrow, so we need to complete our discussion on the plan today. And we have 30 minutes for this agenda item, which I'm going to turn over to Olivia.
Yeah, thanks, you. So I'm just going to run through a few quick slides to give an overview of the comments, and then I'm going to give everyone 5 minutes to actually review the comments. I just sent another email out to your inboxes, so hopefully it's at the top. If you've gotten them, I believe Tuesday afternoon as well, but I know not everyone has the chance to look at them at time. So to kick us off, just a little review of the timeline. Theo just touched on this, but these we only had a 30-day comment period from the Office of Planning and Community Development for this draft plan. So it was released on March 11th. We had a briefing from OBCD at one of our previous school commission meetings, and then we had the chance for a discussion at the April 2nd H&N. And today is the last chance that we have to kind of offer comments and figure out what we're going to say because we have to turn it in tomorrow. And so I'll just ask that if you have comments you want to share today, please have them be like fully thought up so all your peers can hear what we're adding. And we can, concisely add them in so we can send those off. I'll just give a little overview of what's in the comments before I send you off to read them. So there was about 6 different categories of comments, so I put them all into sort of logical buckets. It started off with some appreciation for the plan, which I always like to include. There was a comment that was basically a compliment about the human-centered themes of the plan. There's a section on housing feasibility that points to like the economic feasibility study that was done as part of the appendices of the plan, and a recommendation for the city to include policies that push the 4 studied housing types towards feasibility through development incentives and streamlined permitting processes. There was quite a few comments about I-5 mitigation, which is something OPCD specifically asked the group about. So those touch on improving the sense of safety for those crossing under I-5, support for natural buffers between the highway and housing, and opportunities to improve the experience of folks crossing the highway through creative design and art, in addition to those safety measures. There was a pretty hefty section on open space. This included support for policies that aim to expand and improve opportunities for outdoor recreation, and recommendations of the plan include a clear goal to increase publicly owned outdoor space. The section points to opportunities to add outdoor space through reconnecting the pedestrian grid, building a connected park path between existing outdoor spaces, and further highlighting the center's wetlands and other critical areas. And this section also notes that it knows the importance of clear policies and incentives around expectations for the development of privately owned public space in order to have the amenities we actually expect to see. There's a section on parking and transportation demand management. That section advocates for a baseline parking study of the center, and then to treat, the existing parking that's found through that study like a resource that can be managed across the center, specifically looking for ways to link underutilized parking with new demand that's coming from new development. And the section requests to see the plan set goals around multimodal supply, parking, and vehicle miles traveled. It includes a recommendation to reduce parking where possible, but also focus on improving safety in areas where parking is still necessary. And then there was a section on small business displacement to finish it out. And that section recommends that the city explore additional supports for small businesses and look for new ways to fund shared services such as public trash bins and low-cost meeting spaces that are often managed by local business districts, but that can be a challenge for smaller scale. So that's the overview of what's in the comments. Again, I'm going to give you all 5 minutes to review letter. So starting now, sorry, it's not really a letter. Just a reminder, these are just informal comments that we don't have time to do our full voted on and approved letters. So they're a little rougher than what we often send, but this is more of an internal communication to Office of Planning and Community Development staff than it is a formal letter to council, for example. And with that, I will let you do a review. Let's plan to come back at 3:25.
Right. It's been about 5 minutes, so I'm gonna pass it back to Zia to help facilitate the discussion.
Yeah, all right, there is no one in the queue so far. But
Yes. I'm breaking Olivia's rule. So at our, overall, as I said at the Housing and Neighborhoods Committee meeting, I think there's a lot to really like in this plan. And so it's a breath of fresh air to be looking at a suburban plan that is getting a lot of things right. The letter, we may be underselling a little bit, kind of what's working well about the plan. But I don't have a specific line edit, so I'm very sorry that I'm not prepared to be like, and we should say that it's even better. And so I like that we start off at least with a compliment. One thing that Olivia offered to track down for me after the last meeting was, when does the MUP expire? Simon Properties, old mall site. And it expires in 2034. And Jesse Reynolds indicated when he presented to us that there's not as much market demand now for a lot of the commercial structures that were once envisioned there. And I think a MUP has to be consistent with the underlying sub area. And so if there are any sort of future plan amendments to the MUP or a new MUP or they decide to seek a new MUP because they have such a change in use that they want to come back in for a new vision. I just kind of want to underscore for the city the importance of future proofing or really thinking through as thoughtfully as possible. If there are new opportunities on the site that might not be allowed under the current MUP, but could be if it were reopened, not to miss those opportunities. So the city has like connections that they're proposing or like potential areas for the street grid or pedestrian pathways could be reconnected across the site. But I really want the city to think with as expansive and open of a mind as possible. Because I'm sure they're getting pressure from the underlying property owner not to put those kinds of requirements in place. There's just such long term, maybe not in the near term, but so much potential in the long term for how Northgate could build out into a more complete community. And it starts with a really great dense urban fabric adjacent to the light rail area. And that vision just genuinely cannot be realized if we don't get it right on the side of the state. So I don't really have a line edit. That's just kind of a feeling that I have about maybe we should be saying something like that in the letter. My apologies.
I don't know if anyone has additional thoughts on that topic or want, okay.
Oh, sorry, not for the topic.
No, that's fine. Well, I was just gonna ask if anybody wanted to help Olivia with framing
My
that.
computer just died. So I have a power cord.
I can also stay on it for a bit. That's totally fine. Friends,
Yeah, one of the parts that I wanted to explicitly compliment was the clear through lines of incorporating Indigenous input into the plan, because it's evident if you read the supporting appendices that the works in the appendices made it into the plan itself, which I feel like is something we have not really seen clearly to date. Like we've heard allusions and there's been efforts, but this is probably the most clear example that I've seen. And so I crafted potential draft sentence, but workshopping is welcome.
You want maybe just put right in your screen or put it in the chat.
Yeah. I'm sure it could be better, but that's the general idea. Yeah. So the suggestion is to add to the introduction paragraph. We appreciate the clear incorporation of the indigenous input evident in the plan itself and supporting appendices.
Perception.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe just. See anything to say? Matt, do you have anything to say since your chat's not working? Just checking in.
Nope.
Now I can't see. Technology. Deanna?
I will do my best to try to provide written language, as you know, because of my audio issues. In the past, I'm in my phone, so I would have to type it into the chat through my phone first. But in the parking and transportation demand management section, I will try to propose language that establishes leading rather than with like the parking supply issues. That's secondary to travel demand management overall. So we should kind of lead with travel demand, transportation or travel demand management. As part of the toolbox for travel demand management is a comprehensive parking strategy for the regional center, which considers both on and off-street parking and manages the parking supply with targets to right size that supply to the, the trip generation assumed for these land uses and, kind of the opportunity to reduce parking, given the proximity to transit. So I'll try to provide it. I didn't have the opportunity to draft it before the meeting, unfortunately, but just wanted to say I'll be trying to type that up and provide it here shortly.
Thanks, Deanna.
Myself to the queue. I'm just thinking about Michaela, your comment, and I'm wondering if in the last, either last paragraph of the open space section or the second paragraph in the open space section, there's just a sentence to the end of like including future opportunities associated with the reopening of the MUP process for large parcels in the region. I don't know what you think of that.
We're using open spaces in the context to also talk about the corridors that they have proposed, which may, would be publicly, like public rights of way for.
That I don't know. Those are just two paragraphs. One in which we talk about reducing block sizes through pedestrian connections, and then the last through the addition of public space development, or stronger public space development language.
I think that's like, I think that last paragraph, some sort of concluding statement there related to, or just an add-on statement about Ensuring that, yeah, still have to think about it, but yeah, I'm in alignment with what you were proposing.
Dylan, is your
Yeah, it's fine
item in
for,
the queue for this comment?
yes, for this.
And then Nick, is it okay if I put you after Dylan?
That's fine. I also had something on this thread.
Yeah, I guess my question was, is it through the lens of the entire plan, or are we trying to be specific and hit on kind of certain aspects? Like, are we saying that my words basically said that like any pre-existing entitlements, any pre-existing plans that are in this area, as they go through modification process, as they often do, it sounds like they're very well might, considering that it's going to be a lot of commercial that's proposed, and that's probably not going to be developed. We're going to want to change that plan, try to keep it as it is, then after trying to go back through the whole process, try to do a modification. And when we do that modification, just reiterating, reminding the city, we should consider that modification through the lens of this current plan. But I liked your point about calling out specific elements, so maybe it's similar to what I put in, but also providing like a such as these specific topics and listing a couple of the topics that we just listed. Again, was how okay.
Nick, would you like to add on to this?
Just maybe some a question for staff to look into kind of the scope of a MUP, and then just as a comment, we're reviewing policy and the comp plan, which is not regulatory, and any zoning has to be consistent with their comp plan. And sometimes there is that check on making sure a MUP is consistent with the comp plan, but it's not necessarily what's going to require things of projects. And so just in terms of like setting realistic expectations on a MUP expired, being renewed, being modified, or other entitlements that might not be fully aligned with kind of what this sub-area plan update is trying to accomplish. I'm just curious if that's the right kind of comment or consideration, if that actually makes sense. I'm more thinking about the credibility of how we make comments, and if that's like even something that like the OPCD is going to review and say, oh, because SDCI, I'm assuming, does those processes and is looking at what's on the books now in terms of regulations. But more of a question and a lack of understanding on my end of kind of the scope of a MUP. And so more of a question if staff could kind of filter what we're thinking as ideas, knowing that that's the motivation behind it, but whether it makes sense to try and suggest modifications of entitlements should follow this new updated sub-area plan.
Rose?
Yeah, and kind of adding on that, based on, professional experience, it's hard for plans like this to have teeth, and it's almost better to have plans have policies, to have direct departments, to seek public-private partnerships or in other incentive structures to work with private developers and existing landowners. Because at the end of the day, a landowner is going to say, well, it's my property, I have my rights, what I'm proposing is by the code, so I'm going to do what I want to do, right? There's very little incentive for them to say, rip up a parking lot to make a publicly accessible amenity, right?
Yeah, so maybe it's like seeking opportunities to partner with major landowners on realizing the vision of the sub-area plan. And that way it's some direction to the department, whether that be OPCD or SDCI, whoever the plan is speaking to go pursue those opportunities, especially since we know some of those major moves are going to happen within those larger ownership groups, property holdings.
I appreciate these perspectives. Sorry, this is Michaela. I'm going to call myself.
Yeah.
Sorry. appreciate these perspectives. I think you guys are bringing up valid points. I just want to make sure that the Sudbury plan isn't missing out on opportunities to call out redevelopment potential that they're not putting in there because it wouldn't even be allowed under the current map on that site. So I just want it to be consistent. I want any future kind of redevelopment proposals, if they come back in for a revised map or a new map, to be consistent with the Sudbury plan. But given its limitations, and its lack of teeth, and the fact that I am not prepared with red line edits today to suggest, I'm actually gonna withdraw my proposal to add it. It's not that important or appropriate. So thank you.
Dylan, you.
Yeah, I don't know if that just takes all the air out of our balloon. But I did just want to point out that, you know, when developers do go through this process and do seek out modifications, there's often a series of trade-offs all the time, but there's a lot of gray areas. And sometimes there are trade-offs where there's a give and a take. And so, you know, allowing opportunities for parts of this new plan to be incorporated into proposed modification, if then the city gives a little bit to the developer in this other way, is realistic and does happen. I don't know if we need to get into the weeds to try to describe that in our comments, though.
Yeah.
I think it's probably something the city is going to just do by automatically. So I'm kind of on the fence too with you, Michaela. I don't want to lose an opportunity to remind, you know, the existing plans or encouraging existing plans to meet these new ideals, but I don't know that we need to take that far into the weeds because the city should be doing that.
Yeah. 3 more minutes on this topic. So if there's any additional comments, should get those in now. But
So just to close the loop on that discussion, is there consensus on avoiding adding any comments regarding the mill site or seeking opportunities? Or do folks want to have the sort of more minimal comment that was suggested by Nick of seek opportunities to partner with major landowners to realize the vision?
I'm in favor of adding no additional language around it.
aligned on that. Stakeholder involvement is part of the plan. Sorry. This is a good conversation. Okay. It seems like we might be able to wrap this agenda item then if no one on the call has any additional comments. But also we have 2 more minutes, so feel free.
And where's Dion's coming? It's not in the chat, maybe we cast it.
Deanna, if you do end up wordsmithing your comment and you want to email it to Vanessa, and then we can read it aloud just into the record at the end of the meeting. But otherwise, I think we'll move on from this topic and into our next briefing. And I think I saw our friends from SDOT on the call.
Hello.
Oh, good. Yes. Yay. Okay. Sweet. So today we have Jaya Zaguirre and Radhika Dekade from Seattle Department of Transportation to update us on the department's low pollution neighborhood pilot program. We have an hour for this agenda item. Welcome, Jaya and Radhika. Please try to leave about 25 minutes at the end of your presentation for questions, comments, and discussion. But
Thank you. Do you mind if I share screen?
Go ahead. Fantastic. Yeah.
Okay. So, hi, wait, sorry. Okay, can you see my presentation? Yes, okay. Good morning, oh, good evening. Thank you guys for the opportunity to be here and provide an update on low pollution neighborhoods. My name, for those of you who don't know me from the last update, is Jaya Esaguirre. I am an urban designer in the Policy and Planning Division, and I'm the program manager for low pollution neighborhoods, which we affectionately recall LPNs because it's a mouthful. So before we get into discussing LPNs themselves, I want to recognize that this work is building on a strong and long-lasting foundation of climate commitments in Seattle. It's building on the climate change response framework, C40 commitments, the last mayor's executive orders, and of course the voter-approved transportation levy that funds this work. So what are low pollution neighborhoods and why do we need them? Through LPNs, we're responding to a few key challenges. Firstly, transportation is the largest source of climate pollution in Seattle. Secondly, these impacts of pollution and climate risks are not evenly distributed across neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods have more, some neighborhoods feel them differently. And thirdly, many of the city's programs that already do work to address these issues are not aligned in the same places. Low pollution neighborhoods are our way of bringing those efforts together. We're thinking about them as designated areas where the city can coordinate actions to reduce pollution and strengthen climate resilience. And we're doing this by aligning departments, working in partnership with communities, and using a mix of policies, programs, and projects to deliver clean air, safer streets, and more resilient neighborhoods. Over the last year, we've secured the federal RAISE grant to fund this planning effort and move us towards implementation. Good news today, we finally got our scope approved from the federal government, so we will be hopefully sharing some news on actually kicking off this planning effort very soon. But just to give you a sense of what the next 16 months of planning will look like, the next year, phase 1, will focus on planning and partnership building. We will work with communities in the pilot areas to understand their priorities, identify strategies, and build out that initial toolbox and metrics. In 2027 and onwards, we will move towards design and delivery. We will take those strategies, align them with city programs, and begin building and implementing priority projects in those areas. And from 2028 onwards, we will be focusing on evaluation and scaling. That means tracking outcomes, learning what works, resourcing the delivery of longer-term priorities, as well as refining the model so we can potentially expand to other neighborhoods with that funding that we probably have to apply for grants or find additional sources for. A key part of this LPN effort is coordination across departments. Over the last few months, while we've been waiting for the scope and contract to be executed, we have been meeting across SDOT, OSC, SPU, SCL, OPCD, Parks, OED, and more to help identify those potential partnerships in this work and guide the program development and pilot delivery over the next years. Just to give an example of what that might look like, SDOT might bring street design, mobility, safety improvements. Seattle City Light might contribute electrification strategies. SPU might bring stormwater and climate resiliency work. And other departments might help align some of their climate programs and partnerships through community engagement. Sorry. What could LPNs look like in practice? The idea here is layering multiple projects and strategies in one place that responds to local conditions and priorities in a coordinated way. LPNs is going to do this through a shared toolbox. We think of it as a set of policies, programs, and projects that the city can draw from and tailor to each neighborhood. Across a neighborhood, that might include mobility and safety improvements, like safer walking and biking connections, traffic calming, safer crossings. It could also include things like transportation strategies, such as electric vehicle charging, support for cleaner freight and deliveries, and expanded mobility options. In addition, we're also looking at climate and neighborhood resilience, including things like greening, tree canopy, stormwater and cooling strategies, coordination with resiliency hubs and community infrastructure. And finally, an important part of this work is improving access to programs and coordinated investment. So making it easier for residents and businesses to connect to existing city programs, aligning investments in the same areas, and reducing barriers to participation. Together, we think that this layered toolbox-based approach will allow LPNs to deliver a more meaningful and visible improvement at the neighborhood level through this coordination. So last month, we publicly announced the initial low pollution neighborhood pilot locations through the SDOT blog and socials. These locations were identified using a set of criteria that focused on areas where coordinated action could have the greatest impact, as well as looking at factors like pollution burden, climate risk, safety, and access to transportation options. The 3 areas that were identified for LPN pilots are South Park and Georgetown in a sort of combined effort, Lake City and Capitol Hill, along with a broader set of candidates for future phases of the program, LPN 2.0. Think of these, each of these neighborhoods, they reflect different conditions across the city, while they also share common challenges around pollution burden, extreme heat, flooding risk, pedestrian and bike safety, and freight complexity. They also have very strong community partners. We've been working with the DRCC, DVSA, Lake City Collective, and the Cap Hill Urban League, to list a few, and they will be critical as we move forward into the planning phase and begin developing strategies. So as we move forward, our focus is going to really be on getting this work underway in the pilot neighborhoods. We'll kick off planning with community partners pretty soon, including neighborhood assessments to understand the local priorities and early engagement with community organizations. At the same time, we will be working on building out that city's LPN toolbox and begin advancing strategies for each neighborhood so we can move from the planning into the implementation phase. Overall, this next phase is about turning the framework into something tangible, working with communities to shape solutions and setting the city up to deliver on some of its really bold climate commitments. So thank you, and this is the time for questions. I know I went kind of fast, but I know there's a lot of thoughts on this, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Rose?
Yeah, so I pulled up the blog post that has the nice map showing where the pilot locations and potential future locations are. And I was just curious, like the South Park, Georgetown, and Lake City ones make a lot of sense to me. They're in areas that are high equity priority, as well as within the communities impacted by air pollution, but the Cap Hill one is not as obvious to me. And so I'm wondering if you could talk more about why Cap Hill made it in, but other pilots within the burdened areas for air pollution did not.
Yeah, well, there's kind of 2 elements to this. The first is we had a working group before I joined SDOT, to be honest, where they were talking about where pilot locations might be, doing some of that initial scoping. And I think the sense was that even though, there's a lot of neighborhoods that experience climate risk, that experience pollution, we kind of had to start somewhere. And South Park and Georgetown, Lake City, these were, pollution burdened neighborhoods that presented that opportunity. So there was a little bit of just find some place to start. The reason Cap Hill is in there, there's a few reasons, but one of the main ones is we thought it was important to find neighborhoods that represented different urban conditions so that we could develop an LPN toolbox that could be implemented throughout the city. Whether it's more dense downtown, freight logistic, complicated area, or whether it's, a neighborhood like Lake City or Georgetown. It's not just about these pilot locations, but also the framework for the LPN program as a whole.
Michaela? And I have a separate comment, but I can speak to that a little bit because I used to work at the Capitol Hill Eco District. So I've written lots of grants about why Capitol Hill. High rate of renter population. And so in terms of exposure and in terms of people who don't have as much like, and not just renters, but there's a preponderance of income restricted housing in the neighborhood. So you actually do have rooted in that community, a lot of folks who make less than, 60% of AMI, and who are vulnerable populations. And then I-5, the apartment buildings that are adjacent to you and kind of like off of I-5 experience a lot of exposure to air particulate matter. So, and then they have just all of these delivery trucks moving around both in between the business community and then the residential neighborhoods as well. So, and I think one of the things that I think is a key to success for a pilot like this is you have to go into communities where there's infrastructure or from like on the ground with community-based organizations. And so I think you have the right ingredients for success in the 3 pilot communities that you're working with. The eco district is no more, but the Urban League did take over the eco district. And so there's folks kind of with that equity lens doing work in that community. And so so then my question was, can you speak a little bit as to why your internal engagement structure doesn't include working with Department of Neighborhoods or the Office of Housing? In particular, because the city has a lot of dollars invested in income restricted housing. And oftentimes if a pilot like this is successful and it's going to be replicated, a lot of the community-based organizations that you may work and partner with might also be organizations that are building community within the buildings that they own. So just can you speak a little bit about why there's those 2 neighborhoods in OH are missing from this group?
Yeah, we are actually planning on meeting with the Department of Neighborhoods, and we're not really we're still working on making sure we're including all the different stakeholders both at the city level and at the community level. So there's no reason we're not including them. It might just not be on the chart.
And from a resilience perspective, I just think there's an interesting opportunity to think through cooling centers, battery charging places within buildings that have populations that have like critical needs. And so thinking through your affordable senior housing projects, for example, could be places where you build community resilience, not just for the people who need to make sure that their oxygen tanks or their machines keep operating if we have power outage, but also for the broader community. Very excited to see this work happening. Thank you for the good work.
Thank you.
Deanna?
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation and congratulations on getting it started. I wanted to ask about, and I don't think I missed it. My internet went off for a second, so I missed the first couple of slides. Did you touch on the metrics of success, how we were going to measure basically from, kind of a baseline condition? I assume, of course, emissions is part of it, but what are the metrics and particularly around, measuring changes in mode shift, travel dynamics, travel demand management vision and approach to these low pollution neighborhoods probably is an interesting outcome out of them as a metric of success. And so I was just curious if you, when and or if you have that evaluation framework developed and when, because that really I think is what shapes a transparent definition of what the project is. So curious if you could speak to that. And I have another follow-up question, but I will wait for my other commissioner peers to go, and then we'll try to see if there's more time for my questions.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really great point, and it's definitely something we've been thinking about. We are going to be working with the consultant and with community to help develop what those evaluation metrics might be and what is going to matter in terms of what we measure and what we are able as well to capture through the tools that we have. I think there definitely is going to be strong alignment with evaluation metrics from the STP and that framework so that we are measuring within kind of the same system and family of the evaluation metrics that were defined in the levy. But there might be more, there might be some that are higher priority, and that's what we're going to be working through the planning process and community engagement.
Okay, so that, sorry, just to clarify, so that would be, it's kind of in the works as one
It's,
expects.
yeah, it's in the
And
works.
then when, but would, I think just it would be valuable for the commission to understand kind of like that baseline metrics and approach even ahead of kind of choosing strategies to understand kind of, and evaluate if the strategies picked are actually directly linked to affecting those metrics and outcomes. So just, it would be, I think, we would welcome the opportunity to have, as that, like, share again, any updates on the LPNs once that framework is established.
Great, yeah, I'll make a note of that and I'll come back to you once we have some of that work started.
Thank you.
Got Dylan and then Matt in the queue.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. While I was listening to you talk, I was naturally thinking about the EPA and other types of pollution that exist. And so in hearing about this particular program, it's heavily centered on air pollution as it relates to transportation. I was just wanting to hear more about how you're navigating other types of pollution that also might be mitigated when you're developing these, or developing the toolkit and thinking about air pollution mitigation at large.
Sorry, do you mind reframing? Sorry, restating that? I kind of cut out.
Yes, I can also talk louder. Sorry. When you're developing this toolkit, I was wondering how you're thinking about other forms of pollution that also might be mitigated in addition to air pollution. And I was reading on the website, you talk about noise pollution. I think that's like an easy win. So just want to hear more about your thoughts on kind of mitigating other types of pollution in addition to air pollution.
We're thinking about it, I think, as holistically as possible. Obviously, SDOT, we are limited in our capacity of the types of pollution we can influence, but we're also working closely with SPU and SEL and many other departments as well to think about these things in a collaborative and combined ways. Usually, one form of pollution also comes, like cars come with greenhouse gas emissions, but they also come with noise. So a lot of these things are connected. I mean, we're thinking about it. I don't know. We're going to have to kind of see what tools and strategies are accessible to us through this program and what we can work with community in terms of their priorities and means of addressing them. But the more pollution we can reduce, the better overall. So, but definitely something we're thinking about. I know there's also on the Duwamish, water pollution is a big issue as well. So we're having these conversations. I don't have a defined answer yet because we don't really have a strict framework of what those toolbox items are or evaluation metrics until we start the planning process, but we're keeping an open mind.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hi, Aditi. Sorry.
I was just going to add, hey everyone, Aditi Kamboj, Urban Design Manager at SDOT. Wanted to just add to Joya's response and that coordination with OSC, sustainability and environment is a key part of this, and they have done work around indoor air quality monitoring. And so that is another element of this as we start doing engagement and sort of coordinating with them on additional pilot areas or measurement areas that we can look at.
Thanks. Matt?
Yeah, hi. Let's see. I don't know why I have such a hard time with this. The central, I'm quoting from the original grant, the central objectives of this project are to create safe environments for non-motorized travelers, reduce vehicle miles traveled, encourage mode shift to low emission transit for longer trips. Or for longer trips between neighborhoods and centers. So reducing VMT, we don't really have any sort of metrics for that. reducing or encouraging mode shift. Again, no metrics for that. I read the list, I read the ambitions in the grant, and I see a much more bold project than when I look at what we're planning as these pilot toolkit items in these 3 neighborhoods. One, there, I don't think anywhere we talk about actually reducing VMT. And I don't know anywhere that we actually talk about reducing the number of car trips. And this I don't know, inability to grapple with the number one source of pollution, like and dealing with the elephant in the room is a fatal flaw in the low pollution neighborhood sort of construct. I think these are things that are great for for lots of reasons. However, like if this really is bold action, I'm seeing things that are like within the transportation plan, within Vision Zero, things that we should be doing anyway. This is not a stretch for us. The fact that we're limiting these tactics to these 3 neighborhoods, to me, is shows how much like these are things that every neighbor should like that SDOT should be trying to achieve for every neighborhood. This is not a. I'm sorry. I just really do not see where this is going beyond the baseline for SDOT in terms of safety and care for our residents.
Aditi,
Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
Matt, thank you for your
Thank you.
comment. We do have the Seattle Transportation Plan, which has a number of these measures as performance measures for the system as a whole. So that definitely exists, and we're going to be using many of them as we're doing planning in these areas. Having said that, I think what we're trying to do here is to start to focus investments in areas and work with community to bring together different ways of investment in one area and one geography to try and maybe catalyze more of that shift in certain areas in these neighborhoods sooner, possibly through this program. And I think that's sort of a while we work on projects citywide through projects that have been identified through the transportation plan, this is another sort of set of investments and funding for these neighborhoods to advance it sooner, if that makes sense.
But if, for example, our goal is by 2030 to have 90% of personal trips be zero emission, I would think that in low pollution neighborhoods, it should be 100%. We should have a higher benchmark if we're adding resources specifically for these neighborhoods to go beyond the baseline. I don't see that we're, I want this to be much bolder. And I think in order to do so, we have to deal with the elephant in the room, which is that that our city is designed around the car specifically, and until we engage in a mode shift in thinking about the paradigm of our streets, it's not gonna change. I don't think, we look at the climate response diagram that talks about all those the mode shifts, and has that changed since that diagram was produced 3 or 4 years ago? I don't think so. So how are we going to get there? That's my concern.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons we've picked different land use contexts is to study that for those various land use areas. For example, Capitol Hill has different level of transit investment than Georgetown and South Park. And I think that's part of this conversation about what else needs to happen where we don't have high capacity transit and it's not in the plan in the long run. So, what are the investments we need to make for walking and biking and access to bus and, improvements to the transit experience that makes it safer and more comfortable for more people to ride. So I think that is our focus through this. And we're hopeful that we can start to refine some of our tools for this variety of land use contexts and the various types of pollutions that come with that.
Thank you.
All right, I'm next to Mick.
I think this is related to what the two of you were just talking about, but I would be interested in hearing about how you're thinking about engaging stakeholders that aren't necessarily in the city or the community. I'm speaking from specifically the recency bias yesterday of the First Avenue Bridge being stuck open during peak commute hours and sitting on a bus for 90 minutes in South Park and feeling the impact of all of this transportation, all of these vehicles and buses being stuck on the surface roads in South Park during peak commute hours and the burden that that puts on that community, but also the understanding that those vehicle miles and the folks that are not taking those modes of transportation aren't necessarily like located in that neighborhood, and therefore it's a burden that aren't even necessarily coming from Seattle proper, and so it's a burden that's held by that community that is sort of outside of like Seattle itself's ability to impact. And additionally, how South Park and Georgetown are served by very few buses, and to your point about the amount of transportation investment in these neighborhoods, just how you're thinking about partnering or talking to or working with some of the folks that are outside of the city and maybe even also outside of the community that also hold some of the keys to creating a better environment for these places.
Yeah, we are working on developing that stakeholder list. One of the things we've been thinking about is developing like working groups and identifying some of those other stakeholders that might not be community partners, that might not be other city agencies, and trying to start conversations on the shared impacts, shared experiences around pollution in these neighborhoods. We're building a comprehensive list. We might be engaging them in different ways. Some of them might be more project-specific conversations. Some might be more site-specific. Some might be program-specific, or some might just be, touching base with them and understanding potential for collaboration. We're still building out that framework, and I think that's something that's going to come through a little bit more as we do community assessments and start building out our initial neighborhood framework with the consultant.
Yeah, and I think interagency, I mean, the bridge with WashDOT, like assets owned by other agencies that impact and influence, both residents within Seattle, but folks who have to come to and through Seattle is part of this. I think we need to start somewhere, and we need to start with the planning process, talk to neighbors, understand, we're at that threshold of starting that work, which we're really excited to be here at this point, to keep it moving, and really interested to see what we hear from communities as being the things they want to prioritize our attention to and investments towards. So I think, and then ongoing, SDOT is working with WashDOT and other agencies all the time around some of these long-term maintenance needs as well, but don't have a solution for it all just yet.
Yeah, of course, all good. I think Deanna, then Dylan G are in the queue.
Thank you. Hi, Aditi. Great to see you. I was curious, I know that, again, based on the indicators or the baseline metrics that will be used, et cetera, but we could probably equate, and knowing that it's not exactly the same, this to what are termed low traffic neighborhoods, right? Which in the end have, dramatically similar goals in European cities. And, with regards to that, really, these areas, these low traffic neighborhoods tend to be, 2 miles long, really focused on ensuring the reduction of cut-through traffic. Parking actually doesn't get much affected because then the avoidance of cut-through traffic makes parking availability actually be phenomenal for residents, right? And so I'm just curious, how much a parking strategy and VMT reductions and reduction in cut-through traffic is part of the toolbox or centered as a core kind of foundation of the low pollution neighborhoods for the Seattle framework.
Aditi, do you want to take that? Sorry, I thought it was addressed
Sure.
to you.
Yeah. It is very much part of the variety of tools that we are wanting to engage with communities on. I think we want to, have that engagement process, bring all the stakeholders along in identifying the issues and opportunities, and want to be careful about not leading with all the solutions because that can also slow things down, I think, in the longer run. And so I think we want to be systematic, but that's definitely one of the tools. And we were actually, there is work in this space. Our Greenways group has been doing work in this space for a long time and has learned a lot. And I think some of those thresholds around traffic volumes and what's appropriate for what types of streets, we already have a lot of those sort of defined through all of these programs. And I think that will be informing our work definitely as we're going forward, both existing and sort of goals for some of these streets, right? And what that means for neighborhoods. And I think we're trying to, it's an opportunity to collect data, particularly if you do tactical interventions, to look at what the impacts are on adjacent streets and keep adjusting to get to where we want to be in some of these areas.
Thank you.
And sorry, Diana, one more thing, just the land use context is also part of this sort of, I think depending on density, availability of transit, there are opportunities that are different from where,
totally
job center distance plays into how people are getting around, and then, cut through traffic as well as part of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate this effort and kind of the aspirations behind it, and kind of listening to Matt's comments, and I'm curious. I see that this year, 2026, 2027, is when you guys are developing metrics, what those metrics might look like, developing tools and working with community. And so I'm curious what you envision for those in metrics being, what are your aspirations there? Is it reduced vehicle miles traveled, and will there be a report that shows that? And also, I feel like maybe there is a little bit of initial shying away from, like you just mentioned, painting too clear of a picture of the end result, because you want to make sure community buys in, community is involved, community shapes it. Nobody wants to somebody from the outside come in and tell them how to live in their community. I completely get that. But at the same time, what if the community doesn't want to reduce their driving? How do you then bring them on board and hit this initial goal of reducing vehicle miles traveled? So I guess this kind of two-part question. One is, what are your aspirations for what those metrics may look like? And the second part is, how do you just make working with community to kind of bring them on board, educate them, make them part of this, but also make sure that your aspirations are not watered down if there's resistance?
I think I'll start with the second question about how we are hoping to bring community along with this. So it's a new concept, right? Low pollution neighborhoods in Seattle. It's not something we've had before. I think it's going to be a combination of maybe a more like interactive conversation than just an engagement, getting feedback and going with it. I think there's going to be a lot of ideas that we might have to pilot, that might be more tactical, where we test things out, theorize, maybe try pilots that haven't been done in Seattle or even similar cities before. And also really focusing on education and understanding why these things matter. It's easy to focus on people driving and that being a huge, component to pollution, but it's also hard to encourage a shift if there's not alternatives available that are accessible and safe. And so building up that framework, not and getting people, accustomed and informed on different options, different solutions, reducing barriers, making sure things are more accessible, and having it be more of a conversation, I would say. In terms of the aspiration for metrics, I think there's a combination of wanting things to be impactful, having things that really help reduce the pollution and the experience of pollution, as well as just improving quality of life as a whole. But then there's also the element of what we can measure and what we can track, and finding metrics that help us meet both of those needs. Aditi, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but it's still early
I think
days.
yeah, no, you covered it well. I think there's also the context of, there's big transit investments in the region. There is sort of all our new levy projects that are currently being initiated and planning. So it's sort of it's multi-part kind of trying to move it along. But I think one of the things we're trying to do and what LPN is slightly different from SDOT programs is there is this focus of this multi-departmental sort of coordination within these neighborhoods. So really bringing along the Office of Economic Development and our colleagues there, and thinking about how, and working with small businesses and thinking about how these projects can actually benefit them. What are some other barriers for actually sort of transitioning to electric cargo bikes? Just really trying to explore all the possible opportunities to pilot new things in a sort of in a focused way, in a coordinated way. I think that's we're excited about being able to do that with our sister agencies through this effort. We typically are more sort of focused on a transportation project and mitigation around construction, that kind of thing. I think here we also want to think about, how can this actually benefit you and your customers and your employees? What needs to happen to sort of shift the needle a little bit?
Hi, and I can add a little bit too. This is Radcliffe Dakna. I'm the climate officer there. And we get this question a lot around VMT. Will it reduce it? Possibly, yes. It's not a one-to-one thing that if you do these things, people will stop driving. I think there's a combination here of when we measure it at the city, there are things on the supply side that we provide more bike lanes, more transit, more access to multimodal options. We can still do all of those things, but if driving still remains very easy, or gasoline, things that are sort of out of our circumstantial control, there needs to be a demand side element to that we don't often talk about or may not be in our toolbox. But if that is something the community wants us to explore and move forward on, it gives a broader conversation of what it is that we need to do to reduce the demand or cut back the demand on driving, and thus reduce VMT.
I guess almost kind of what I'm hearing from you guys is it's almost like you guys are able to, with this these pilots, these 4 neighborhoods, kind of embed yourself with the community as to kind of determine where their interests are and how basically these pilots are impacting them. So yeah, I'm curious to see where it goes.
Can I go there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a really interesting conversation. Listening to Matt sort of push you all, and then sort of hearing the statement that we've never tried this before. And then sort of this should be business as usual for SDOT. The things that you're saying you're going to pilot around coordination, around working in partnership with community, around testing all of the strategies. It really needs to happen at scale across the city, and it needs to happen at a speed that SDOT and the city's not moving at the moment. And so it's just kind of like remarkable to hear, like, we're just going to do it in these 3 communities. And it's going to be just a special pilot. We're going to do our other transportation business over here. And just, I'm a little bit sensitive to, like, we've never done this before. The Capital Eco District was around for a really long time trying to do this work rooted in community. And SDOT was actually not a very helpful partner in a lot of the work that we were trying to do. We were trying to bring the business community together with the residential community. And the minute you start talking about parking, the minute that comes up is the minute you lose the business community. And so these types of things, people have been advocating for this. There have been specific teams within SDOT who've been trying these strategies across the city. It's not that it's like we don't have enough resources to actually execute this at a scale that will be meaningful, which sort of leaves me with a feeling of like, well, why are we investing in this at all if we're not going to be doing it citywide and it's not going to be the new philosophy and practice at SDOT to really try and remove barriers and increase coordination and support communities and execution effectively. We're climate crisis doesn't seem to be the top priority for voters anymore, but it is still a top priority for me. I think about it a lot. Just would really encourage us to take a message back to your leadership that more of this in more places faster is and kind of a shift in SDOT's approach to where you're prioritizing and what where you're investing the resources. Matt, are you in agreement with what I said?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. I think the idea that we should be pushing the baseline and then, or that our expectations are for a higher baseline and in general. And that's a hurdle. However, when we set up this special program, our expectations are even greater. So I want to see super blocks. Why don't we have super blocks? It's in the grant. We talk about it. It's something we did in Capitol Hill 40 years ago.
At the Eco District, down pipeline, and that said, open it back in this pilot because of pressure.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see concrete things that like challenge the status quo in real physical ways, not just in not a toolkit, an abstract network of assets. I want to see a street close, and I want to see that turned over to other modes, like physically for other modes to be the only ones to use that street. If you do that once, like that's a radical. It feels like a radical action. I mean, we have thousands of miles of streets, and we can't close one block. And I look at this program like I don't know how we get to a radical reduction in pollution if we're not willing to extend the baseline to everyone and to take some risk.
If I could just sort of respond to that to say that, LPN is one area of investment focus and planning. The Seattle Transportation Levy has a whole range of other programs that's also focused, and we'll be working with a number of programs and focusing investments and projects. So they are going to lead to actual physical projects. In particular, the People Streets Public Spaces program that is funded through the levy is looking to do exactly, Matt, what you're recommending is that we are looking in our work plan at pedestrianizing blocks of street with community and creating places for people to gather, roll, and walk through. But that also has circulation and benefits and air quality benefits as a result, right? So there's a lot of that. Our school streets program is doing a lot of that across Seattle right now. We're looking to take those to the next level as well. Our healthy streets have been out there for a while and wanting to keep improving on those. There's an opportunity through the state's shared streets legislation for SDOT to create more of those really slow shared environments that have the design standards and regulatory support to create really great places for people. So I think we're moving in that direction. We're getting there. It's gonna, it has its We are appreciative of your support and advocacy on this, and we want to keep doing more of it.
I think the photograph on this slide is indicative. I think we see here street closed, but is it closed? No. There's 2 temporary concrete blocks with a sign on it, and otherwise it's the same street. And until that street is actually closed and there are no cars on that street, the situation has not changed. Anyway, thank you.
Can I chime in?
Yep.
Matt, agree with a lot of what you said, but I disagree with the last statement you said, at least from my perspective, because I do believe that where my comment was intentionally, I don't think, predetermining like, oh, this picture, and if there's cars, then it's bad. That's actually not, it's kind of like when you go and get your blood test and you figure out if you are low in vitamin D and B12 and whatever. And those, kind of like the metrics of the health of this community and emissions, like has nothing to do with whether there's cars there or not. In fact, cars, it doesn't matter how many cars you have, is how much cars are driven, right? It is, are they being used a lot? Access, still allowing access to a street is not the problem. It is, are we choosing more often than not driving for hyper local trips, right? That's kind of really at the core of what I would see the low pollution neighborhoods trying to capture and encourage, which is why I was referencing the low traffic neighborhoods in other parts of the world, because that is where, perhaps at the expense of circuity means longer trips to kind of get to the same destination, right? You still can get there, but it's almost like you have to go, you need to go know your way around in a car to access that front of the block or whatever, right? It just means you cut through traffic. And that's kind of where I was, listening to Ratcliffe's response, and I think I would like to invite SDOT to really think that, yes, VMT should be a metric of success of this program. I think it would be completely at odds to try to have low pollution neighborhoods when you're not trying to reduce mobile sources emissions. And that is a direct relationship to driving, right? So if you're not reducing number of trips by car and replacing them with modes of, a mode shift or a change in that trip to walking or biking or taking the bus, then I don't feel like, then you're not achieving low pollution, because it means you're not actually reducing emissions. We already know the city is growing, like VMT is trending up. Growth is accompanied with greater car use, right? So we already have a trend to increase VMT. So stabilizing it would be a great outcome of these low pollution neighborhoods. Reducing it would be fantastic, of course. But I do think not having a goal that is focused on VMT outcomes would not sound congruent or consistent with the goals of a low pollution neighborhood. So I just would invite or encourage as that to truly still think about the framing. And I understand it's the challenge. This is all about word choice, right? And we don't need to say close the street, you open streets, right? You don't say, don't drive. You say, there's many, this is the art of communication. And I know SDOT has phenomenal, very creative communication staff and messaging, and so that is really going to be the art of the success of this effort and pilot.
Rose?
Yeah, so part question and part suggestion. So pilots, I think, are tricky because the notion of a pilot implies that once it's done, things may go back to how they were. And I was wondering if, on the line of making radical changes, if SDOT is actively considering and partnering with people who use the right of way, organizations like utilities that have utilities running all route, right? like if there are concrete opportunities in these low pollution neighborhoods to actually remove pavement, take it out of use, put it to other uses. So we're not talking about like the temporary barricades versus the healthy streets, but like actual physical take them out of service because they are in service to community connection, to putting in greenery to help with stormwater management, and to actively discourage use for driving, if that makes sense. So, and I know there's some like challenges practically given how the city has developed and how utilities are intentionally within the road prism a lot of the time, but I think there's a lot of value in using pilots like these to make bold choices informed by community, but to consider like how that could be possible.
Yeah, I hear that. I agree that, you know, the implementation timeline of our pilots is very short term, but a lot of these plans and impacts need to be longer term. A big part of this, as we said, is working with other departments and SPU and SEL, you know, utilities as well. Like through this work, I think we're hoping to like figure out and find where those opportunities might lie for collaborated planning in the longer run as well, so that these priorities that come up with the community, that they can start informing the low pollution, you know, depaving, electrification, GSI, all of these goals with other departments as well, and they can be woven into some of the longer range planning and implementation that they are doing as well, beyond, you know, whatever this first round pilot timeline is. I think a lot of these, you know, we're in a limited time. We can't do everything that we want to do within that timeline. It takes so long just to get things in the pipeline for construction. And so if we are thinking in that small time frame, I don't think we will accomplish what we want to, even within this pilot phase. So we are trying to keep an open mind, really focused on tactical work that we, you know, have to do quickly, and then start framing out some of the longer term built work that might take a little bit beyond that 2020 timeline to implement in collaboration with other departments as well as SDOT.
And I'll add that this will be probably low pollution neighborhood 1.0, given that it's 3 pilot areas that we need to deliver by 2028. I think we agree with many of you that we should be doing this all across the city. Our hope, and I think my colleagues too, is that we would like to see that happen, and creating the pathways with the success of this effort right now with the funding that we have, and being able to carry and take it to the next level, and perhaps get another round of funding and more of a solid program to deliver more of these types of neighborhoods throughout the city, because there's definitely strong interest. We've received lots of phone calls from other places in Seattle that would like to also explore low pollution neighborhood opportunities, and I think there's certainly an appetite for it. Certainly there's a political nature to this, and where we allocate our resources. And so I think there's definitely an opportunity to go beyond this pilot, beyond 2028, if there is strong support for it.
Margaret?
Hey, thanks. This kind of overlaps with that last point. And I'm sorry if you've covered it a little bit already, but so the planning is funded through the RAISE grant. But I noticed on the website that the implementation between these 3 neighborhoods are going to be supported by the 8 million dedicated from the transportation levy. So I'm just trying to grasp if you have an idea of how much of the actual project implementation is going to actually need to be coordinated and funded through other existing programs and projects, because that 8 million split between the 3 just seemed like a really low number for me, but I've just been curious if you have any more information or insight into that.
we don't have sort of a number, but I think we realize that it's not a huge budget for capital projects. And I think we are therefore wanting to partner and work with other departments doing work already, identify where there are gaps and maybe focus on those areas with this funding, or where there's leveraging opportunity. There could be, through the planning effort, sort of some early wins identified with community, and then there may be some longer term, bigger budget projects, and we could also use the grant funds as local match in a leveraging strategy to grants, so I think that's part of the conversation, to get more ambitious projects up the door.
We have about 5 minutes left in our topic in our meeting. I just want to see if there's anybody that hasn't spoken up yet who might want to give additional or comment on this topic.
Can I just make one last comment?
Yeah, go for it, Kim.
This is just really median specific. In Capitol Hill, on the backbone, the beating heart of the small businesses there, the low wage workers who work in the restaurants. And it's really hard for the business owners there to retain talent because a lot of them commute in from really far away. And then the nightlife hours are such that it's really, at least when I was working there, it was really difficult for them to have safe, consistent, and convenient transit options back home really late at night. So a lot of them are commuting from outside the city just because the housing costs were really high. Which is why I think kind of a low pollution strategy has to include the housing affordability piece. If folks have an opportunity to live closer to where they work, that not only reduces our vehicle miles traveled, but it actually it strengthens our small business community, and it helps the community amenities that we all love continue to thrive and be there. And so just if you begin to hear once again from the Capitol Hill neighborhood that the small business owners report their employees not feeling safe commuting back to their bus stops at night, or there's a lack of transit service back to where they need to go, those are the types of things that are often really expensive to deliver, and the demand's not really high for it. And I believe maybe SDOT has experimented with some strategies in the past around shuttles and whatnot. But just flagging that as an interest of mine and a potential opportunity in terms of how you bring the business community along and in terms of how it benefits them. So, thank you.
Unless anyone else has final comments on this topic, seems like we may have reached a natural point to conclude it, but
Thanks to the SDOT staff. Thank you for your presentation and for fielding all of our questions and comments and engaging. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
I think at the close of that item on our agenda, we can adjourn.
Bye, everyone on the call. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.